And we are reading text 22, which is up on the board. Before we recite the verse, we chant the invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yo Vanu Shainam Sarga Pasandasya Cha Sambhava Atmano Bandha Moksho Cha Vyavasthanam Swarupatah. Yo Vanushainam Sarga Pasandasya Cha Sambhava Atmano Bandha Moksho Cha Vyavasthanam Swarupatah. Yo Vanushainam Sarga Pasandasya Cha Sambhava Atmano Bandha Moksho Cha Vyavasthanam Swarupatah. Word for word translation. Ya, all those. Va, either. Anushainam, merged into the body of the Lord. Sarga, creation. Pasandasya, of the infidels. Cha, and. Sambhava, appearance. Atmana, of the living beings. Bandha, condition. Moksha, being liberated. Cha, also. Vyavasthanam, being situated. Swarupatah, in an unconditioned state. Translation and purport by His Divine Gracious A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Translation. Please also explain how, merged into the body of the Lord, living beings are created, and how the infidels appear in the world. Also, please explain how the unconditioned living entities exist. Purport. The progressive devotee of the Lord must inquire from the bona fide spiritual master how living entities merged in the body of the Lord again come back at the time of creation. There are two kinds of living entities. There are the ever liberated, unconditioned living beings, as well as the ever conditioned living beings. Of the ever conditioned living beings, there are two divisions. They are the faithful and the infidels. Of the faithful, there are again two divisions, namely the devotees and the mental speculators. The mental speculators desire to merge into the existence of the Lord or to become one with the Lord, whereas the devotees of the Lord desire to keep separate identities and constantly engage in the service of the Lord. The devotees who are not fully purified, as well as the empiric philosophers, become conditioned again during the next creation for further purification. such conditioned souls become liberated by further progress of devotional service to the Lord. Maharaj Parikshit asked all these questions from the bona fide spiritual master in order to become fully equipped in the science of God. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatirubhascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thank you everyone for attending this morning's Bhagavatam class. We continue reading from chapter 8, text 22, and this chapter is titled Questions by King Parikshit. And actually, as I was reading the word for word this morning, just a few minutes ago, the word Sambhava. And actually the verse that you read yesterday is a word called Samplava. Samplava, the perfect means or complete devastation. And Sambhava, appearance. I'm just trying to see if it has similar meaning, but it rhymes, but it's... So here we are speaking, Maharaj Parikshit is keen on knowing what happens when the next creation, what comes forth at the time of the next creation, as we understand, Lord Brahma lives for 311 trillion and 40 billion years. And at the end of Brahma's life, all the living entities, or let me say all the rebellious living entities who didn't quite make it, then they merge back in the body of Mahavishnu, and at the time of the next creation, 311 trillion 40 billion years, there's an alarm that goes off, and then they are pushed back into this material nature to resume where they left off in their previous birth. So here we see, we're continuing these questions by King Parikshit, and how, in one of the earlier verses we saw Srila Prabhupada writing in the purport, how a pure devotee of the Lord is keen to know everything, information that regards to the entirety of this creation. Maharaj Parikshit is not asking, tell me about that one gopi who's with Krishna. He's not jumping into the very esoteric pastimes of Krishna. A lot of times in our own conversations, or it is said that Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur, he spoke on the first verse of the Bhagavatam in Dhaka for 30 days. And if that were to happen for us, if we spoke on the same verse for 2 days, devotees would say, Prabhu or Mataji, please speak on the next verse, because we are not seeing the words of the Bhagavatam. We are not penetrating deeper into the message of the Bhagavatam or in the glorifications that are being spoken there. So, because of our conditioned nature, we are wanting newer and newer things, but in actuality, the Bhagavatam presents newer and newer meanings, provided that we are willing to take that message to our heart and dive deeper into it. So, Maharaj Parikshit's question is actually for everyone's benefit. The foremost question that Maharaj Parikshit asks in the first canto is, what is the duty of someone that's about to die? And from there on, it results in a series of questions. And Sukadeva Goswami congratulates him that your questions are worthy because they're for everyone's benefit. So, this specific question here, please also explain how merged in the body of the Lord living beings are created and how the infidels appear in the world. Also, please explain how the unconditioned living entities exist. And actually, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 14, verse number 2, Krishna describes the result of one who takes to this transcendental knowledge. And what's that? Idam jnanam upashritya mama sadharmayam jataha sargepi nupajayante pralaye na vyatanti cha. By becoming fixed in this knowledge, one can attain to the transcendental nature like my own. Thus established, one is not born at the time of creation or disturbed at the time of dissolution. And similarly, in a previous chapter, chapter 9, verse 3, again Krishna speaking to Arjuna. That who are those that actually come back to this world? And he says, Ashradhana Purushaha Dharma Sasya Parantapaha Aprapya Mam Nivartante Mrityu Samsara Vartmani. Those who are not faithful in this devotional service cannot attain me, a conqueror of enemies. Therefore they return to the path of birth and death in this material world. So, what does this tell us? Obviously, Krishna is repeating that information in many places in the Bhagavad Gita, and we hear this so often in the Bhagavatam. And now when we read it, what effect does it have on us? Do we want to remain in this material world? Or do we want to actually absorb ourselves in Krishna or become attached to Radha Gopinath and the devotees? In one purport in chapter 15, Prabhupada says that we should be fascinated by this information. So when we read, we should want that intense desire to associate with Radha Gopinath in the spiritual world, with the devotees of Radha Gopinath, and as Ishwar Prabhu spoke in yesterday's class with such a beautiful purport, how one should be enthusiastic, not only in performing his rituals of devotional service, but in trying to preach the cult peacefully by following the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya. So we should be enthusiastic. One of the verses in Nectar of Instruction is endeavor with confidence, patience, enthusiasm. If we are enthusiastic. We should be enthusiastic in performing devotional service or in pleasing the instructions of a spiritual master and in the mission of Srila Prabhupada. Now, one may ask, okay, and a lot of times when we speak to devotees, even amongst ourselves, quite often the sense of complacency sets in, and we actually feel, or we are actually in a comfortable place. We are happy, we are happy, Prabhu. Don't speak to us about this message of Bhagavatam that, we're going to die in 7 days, or death is just awaiting us. But in actuality, if you see, even amongst our contemporary devotees, how many of us at least I know of at least a couple of devotees who actually departed this world at a very, very young age. They were even younger than me. And it happened to be at the most, one of them actually left their body in the Dham whilst they were there for their Guru Maharaj's parikram. And then one other devotee was afflicted with a serious health condition which actually made them leave. But in both instances, what I learned, or what inspired me, was that they were completely absorbed in the holy names, absorbed in their service to Krishna and the spiritual master. So this theory of us wanting to intensify devotional service at a later phase in our life is what's, in one sense, Krishna is asking us to just, make every opportunity to make the best use of this moment, because that's what will avoid us. That's what will avoid that situation for us to coming back to this world. In the previous chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, it said those who are not completely purified, those who have not perfected their lives in Krishna consciousness, they get a birth either in the family of devotees or an aristocrat, from where they want to continue their devotional life. Now the question, I asked this question to my Bhakti Shastri teacher, and he said, why do you want to come back? And haven't you learned enough that this material world is actually not, Bhakti Saraswati Thakur also says, this material world is not meant for a gentleman. So we should always remind ourselves that do we want to come back? Why do we want to come back? And in reality, there's this beautiful pastime in the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where Prahlad Maharaj is speaking to his father, where his father Hiranyakashipu asks, my son Prahlad, where did you get? Because Prahlad Maharaj, being one of the 12 Mahajans, he's speaking this knowledge, and his teachers at school were puzzled as to where is he getting this knowledge from. And Hiranyakashipu chastises his teachers, and teachers are like, no, it's not us who's taught him. He himself is actually self-realized in one sense. So Hiranyakashipu asks Prahlad, my son, where did you learn this from? And to his reply, Canto 7, Chapter 5, Verse 30, the final concluding verse, the concluding line of that verse is, Puna Puna Charvita Charanam, chewing the chewed. And in that purport, he says, Prabhupada explains, there are two kinds of people. Griha Vrata, the ones that want to live comfortably. And those that want to live comfortably are repeatedly just wanting to chew the chewed. Which means that they have an experience of what this world is, and they've had experiences where they've been disappointed on many occasions, yet they want to endeavor to again try to have another go at it. Yesterday I was hearing a class by His Holiness Prahlad Nanda Maharaj, and he was saying this on the same principle, that how Brahma, even after living for 311 trillion 40 billion years, is just frustrated that, what this world has to offer. If someone like Lord Brahma, who lived for 311 trillion, 40 billion years, is saying that, who are we? We live for 60 years, and I think we'll have it all figured out in our next birth. So that's our condition. We may laugh at it, but that's who we are. For example, I was hearing, I'm hoping that all of you are aware of the World Trade Center in America. And the World Trade Center, it actually stood for the American, it was such an edifice that basically it stood for American values. We are the greatest. Nothing can conquer us. And when it actually, in unfortunate circumstances, when that incident happened where the two planes crashed into it, it actually caused a permanent damage to the American psyche, to the extent that people say that America will never be the same again. But yet again, as soon as the World Trade Towers collapsed, the American president came on TV like, we will rebuild this World Trade Center, and this will stand the test of times to come. So, whether it's the American president, or whether it's Brahma, or whether it's minute living entities as us, we have this desire to endure our existence for eternity. No matter whatever our situation may be, we want to just endure this existence because we feel that we can figure it out. And that's what will cause for us to come back again and again. So what does Prahlad Maharaj say? How do we get out of this cycle? He says one has to take the shelter of Mahatmas. Because the Mahatmas can impart that knowledge onto you. Famous verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadakshanti te jnanam jnane tattvadarshina. Try to approach try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. They can impart the knowledge into you because they've seen it. So, the Mahatmas, and in the instance of Prahlad Maharaj, it was actually Narada Muni who enlightened him, due to which he became one of the most celebrated devotees. In fact, he is the emblem of Smarana. Always remembering Krishna. So, we should ask ourselves, are we constantly absorbed in Krishna? Have we made Krishna as our goal in life? Attainment of the lotus feet of Radha Gopinath is the goal of our life. And if not, then we realize that there is work to be done. And we endeavor for that. That's where we endeavor to make Radha Gopinath, Srila Prabhupada, the Acharyas, the devotees, service to our devotees as the goal in our life. Now, which means that we have to be determined. And again, I'll quote the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 41. Those who are always, it happens to me. Yep. Vivasmata buddhir ek he kurunandana bahu sakya hinantascha buddhayo vivaschinam. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Guru, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many branch. So are we resolute? Are we determined? And this has been demonstrated beautifully in the pastime of. So, I'll just take a second back. In the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad, so in this purport here, it says there are two kinds of people. Of the conditioned living entities, there are two kinds. One are the devotees, and the other the mental speculators. And again, when we read the Bhagavatam, or the Bhagavad Gita chapter 15, Prabhupada writes, or the translation, one of the translations says, there are two kinds of beings. There are the fallible and the infallible. And we may read that and we may see, okay, well, we are practicing devotees, so actually we are infallible. But in reality, we should try to be we become infallible by the vow of determination. We become determined to serve Radha Gopinath, the devotees, and Srila Prabhupada. And this has been beautifully demonstrated in the pastime of, in the 8th canto, on the pastime of the Samudra Manthan Leela. Now, this pastime, as I read through it, it offers me a lot of hope. Because it speaks about how, despite all challenges, if one sincerely turns their face towards Krishna, Krishna is always there for them. And actually this pastime starts off, and it speaks about how our conditioned nature, how it can either, if we fall prey to a conditioned nature, then that becomes a big setback to our spiritual life. But if we are able to overcome our conditioned nature, then that makes us dear to the Lord. And the pastime starts off with Lord Indra. Now, Lord Indra, we may be amused by his doings in the Bhagavatam or in various other references, but we need to understand, for his name to appear in the Bhagavatam means that he is willing, by his own example and by his own traits, to be used as a puppet in Krishna's service. And the pastime starts off with Indra, the king of heaven, going around on an elephant. And obviously he's being garlanded by many people because, it is said, he's a devotee, and devotee should be garlanded. And a lot of times, even when we walk around, sometimes it may be that devotees are offering us words of praise or, words of encouragement. We accept them and offer them to our spiritual master, or to Srila Prabhupada, because it's only by their grace that we're able to be engaged in Krishna's service, and whatever little credit that we may receive is actually meant for their glorification. So Indra is on his elephant, and it said that if he has a slight bit of pride, and from nowhere shows up the great Durvasa Muni. And Durvasa Muni, as a means of offering his respects to Indra, takes off his garland and garlands Indra. And Indra is just saying, oh, yet another garland. What will I do with it? He takes it and puts it on an elephant. And the elephant, not having that intelligence or the discrimination, just drops it on the ground. And Durvasa Muni sees it and he's very angry. So one thing that we learn from reading the Bhagavatam is that don't make Durvasa Muni angry. So what is this pastime telling us? Pride on the part of Indra. And there's a very famous saying, I'm not sure it's by a philosopher or by someone, that pride cometh to fall. That it was Indra's pride that led to what will happen now. And Durvasa Muni's anger. Now, again, Krishna is staging these pastimes for us to learn important lessons. So on one end it's Indra's pride, and the other is Durvasa Muni's anger. And actually, if we go through this pastime, which we will in a minute, we'll see how Krishna is using both of these personalities, or the traits of these personalities, to teach an important lesson. So Indra then is cursed by Durvasa Muni. Durvasa Muni tells him, you're going to lose everything. And Indra then just I did it again. Chewing the chute. I've done it so many times, and again I've done this blunder. So, as a result of Durvasa Muni cursing Indra, and I'll just cut short, but the asuras, the demigods, become more powerful, and then they take over the heavenly planets. So much so that all of these devatas have to just run. They have to run away from their position. They have to run away from their residence, their palaces, their jewelry. They just have to leave everything behind and run, because There's nothing that they can do. So at that time, obviously, the difference between Devata and Asura is that the Devatas, the demigods, whenever they're in difficulty, they take shelter of Vishnu. So they go to Brahma, and then they submit their plea to Brahma that this is what's happened. We had an aha moment, and Brahma says, "Can't you just leave me peacefully?" And then Brahma takes them all to go to Vishnu. As, like I said, the Devatas are always keen on taking shelter of Vishnu in times of need. And that's a lesson for all of us. In our times of calamity, where do we seek shelter? Obviously, we try our best in one sense of our immediate surroundings, but we should be conscious that our shelter is actually Radha Gopinath. So they go to Vishnu, and actually what Vishnu tells them is something that is actually speaking on a very higher principle. He says, right now time is not on your side. I'm paraphrasing it. Better you go to the Asuras, make truce with them, and churn this milk ocean. And actually, as I was reading it, Vishnu could have easily said, because he's the Paramatma in everyone's heart, or he could have just taken out Sudarshan Chakra and just thrown it at the Asuras, just cut their heads. That'll be the end of the story. But Vishnu is telling them, you know what, just go and make truce with them. And actually, in one sense, it's a message for all of us that in our own lives as practicing devotees, or as devotees having certain natures, or conditioned natures, as it may say, having certain differences, different views, it may be at times, it may be a challenge to work together to achieve success for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada. But if we are just able to just overcome our differences or work on a higher principle, which is to please Srila Prabhupada, then we'll be surprised to see how much of pleasure that actually, how pleasing that is to Srila Prabhupada. So, in this Sankirtan mission, all of us have a role to play. And if you're able to fight our conditioned nature, or fight our anarthas, just to unite in service to Srila Prabhupada, the Vaishnavas, and Radha Gopinath, then victory and fortune will be on our side. So, so the demigods, obviously being obedient servants of the Lord, go to the Devatas and say, you know what, we've come here to make truce with you. But we have to churn this milk ocean. We have to churn this, this mountain, which will actually give us, there'll be different forms of minerals, wealth, and different items that will come through that will be useful for our purpose. So the Devatas say, see, finally you've come to us. Didn't we say that we are more powerful? And the Devatas say, yes, we are your servants, please. Let's get on with the mission. And as they start, and actually it's most interesting to note that in that section of Samudra Manthan Leela, in Canto 8, that's been the most number of incarnations of the Lord that have appeared. First as Ajita, Kurma, Dhanvantari, Mohini Murti, just in that span of whatever, I think 2 or 3 chapters or 4 chapters, I can't remember exactly, that there are. So they start churning the ocean, they start churning the mountain with the help of Vasuki, and it's in Mandra Ocean, and all of a sudden there's no resting place for the mountain, so it just falls on the ocean, and both the demigods and the Asuras are like, oh my god, what's happened? And then Kurmadev appears as a tortoise, the tortoise incarnation, and the mountain is on his back. And it says that as they're churning the mountain, it's causing itching sensation on the back of Gurmadev. And Vishnu tells them that in the course of this churning, there will be so many pleasant things that may come and many unpleasant things that may come. There will be poison that will be generated, which as we see in the past time, is drunk by Lord Shiva, because he is the most compassionate personality for. So there will be poison. So similarly in our lives, in our daily practice, in our sadhana, in our Krishna consciousness, there will be certain unpleasing situations or unfavorable circumstances that we may have to face. But we don't give up our determination. We keep on endeavoring with that determination, because we know that just this slight bit of inconvenience that we may be having is actually taking us a step closer to Radha Gopinath. So Vishnu tells them, don't be discouraged by the poisonous things, and when there are certain nice things that come out, such as in eventually the pot of nectar of immortality, and gold and jewels that may come about, don't be tempted by it. So in our course of our practice, there may be so many temptations that may come to us. Don't be so attached to them, because again, as we understand, our goal, and as chapter 2 verse 41 says, that we should be resolute in our purpose, and that's what will take us to our goal. So as I was reading this purport, and I asked myself, am I willing to fight my conditioned nature? And there are certain questions that I ask myself. One of the quotes in the Shastra is that one should be ecstatic when one sees a devotee. And I ask myself, am I ecstatic when I see a devotee? And quite often the answer is no. And I realize that that's because of the anarthas in my heart. I have certain anarthas such as lust, greed, envy, pride, and I need to overcome them in order for me to actually appreciate devotees. Do I have gratitude for what's been given to me? Am I grateful for the gift that Srila Prabhupada, Guru Maharaj, and the different devotees are offering us? Am I ecstatic to come in front of Radha Gopinath and just serve them? And quite often, actually not quite often, most often, the answer is no. So we fight our conditioned nature to become dear, because again, our goal is samsiddhi haritoshnam. Whatever we do, it should be for the pleasure of the Lordship, Sri Radha Gopinath, Srila Prabhupada, and the devotees. And that's what will allow us to become the eternal residents of, Radha Gopinath's Dham, the devotees. So, I would like to conclude on this, that these questions that Maharaj Parikshit is asking here, we should not discern them, because these aren't pointing to certain pastimes of the Lord, because he's asking about the creative energy here. So we should make an effort to also within our heart ask those questions that will purify our consciousness, purify our, which will purify our mind, purify our heart, which will make us dear to the Lord. Okay, I'll end here if anyone has any question, comments. Grantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Tago Premanande. Srila Prabhupada ki.